clinical psychologist with a private practice, and Father Nicholas is the priest at St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church in Jacksonville, Florida. Together, we seek to assist our listeners with the spiritual and psychological principles that help us contend with the things of this world that separate us from Christ and that prevent us from leading healthy and productive lives.
And in this sense, friends, our show is really all about you, the listener. And we've heard from countless individuals who have benefited from it greatly, sharing with us what they've learned and how it has changed both their souls and their minds for the better.
Are you one of these people? Have you heard something on Live with the Louhs that has improved your approach to faith and life? If so, you should know that this program, which is made lovingly for you, is also dependent on you for its continued existence.
That's right. Not only our show, but every program and podcast on Ancient Faith Radio is entirely listener supported. This means that without the generosity of listeners like you, there'd be no Live with the Louhs. There wouldn't even be an AFR radio.
If you're not already doing so, would you please take a moment to consider right now adding your contribution to those of the other Ancient Faith radio fans who help keep shows like Live with the Louhs on the air for you.
And you should know, friends, that's an easy process. Just go to ancientfaith.com and click on the donate button. It's in the upper right-hand corner. We encourage you, be a participant, be a partner, become an Ancient Faith radio donor today, friends. And we thank you in advance for your support.
Welcome to Live with the Louhs with your hosts, Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne Louh, where we will connect our Orthodox faith to day-to-day living and relationships to our family, our work, and our view of ourselves. Father Nicholas is the priest at St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church in Jacksonville, and Dr. Roxanne is a licensed clinical psychologist who uses her extensive training in private practice. Questions are welcome by calling 855-237-2346. That's 855-237-2346. Here now is Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Live with the Louhs. My name is Father Nicholas Louh. So grateful that you're joining us tonight. I'm the parish priest at St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church right here in Jacksonville, Florida. And tonight I'm joined by my lovely wife and co-host, Dr. Roxanne Louh.
Good evening, everyone.
And as you all know, Roxanne's a clinical psychologist. And if you're new to Live with the Louhs, one thing that you should know is that we are really priding ourselves on trying to develop a program and a ministry that merges both faith and psychology to give you some practical steps that you can use in your walk of faith. So thank you so much for being with us. And if you find this show beneficial, do us a favor, help us to share Christ's light by just telling your friends and family about it. You know, before we dive into tonight's topic, I do want to encourage all of you, as we do every single week, to join our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, we're on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all under the headings of The Louhs. And that last name is spelled Louhs. That's The Louhs. In fact, our show tonight is being broadcast on our Facebook page as well. So if you're on social media right now, go and like us, again, on The Louhs, and you can listen to the show as well in the live broadcast. And also, if you're interested in receiving our daily inspirational messages, we would love for you to do so. We just hope that they inspire you and encourage you in your walk of faith. If you do want to, go right now, actually during the show, go to thelouhs.com, that's our website, and simply click on the subscribe button. You'll find it in the far right corner of the homepage. And all you have to do is simply put in your email address. And every single day at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, you'll receive our word of encouragement. And as always, if you find them helpful, friends, share them with your friends and family. So today we're going to be talking about a topic that I can't believe we're already at, and that is the holiday season.
It's crazy.
Right. We're talking about how do we manage holiday stress. You know, friends, it's often said about the holidays that it's the most wonderful time of the year. You've all heard that before. You heard the music about it. And it is. We love hearing those Christmas carols. We love decorating the Christmas tree. We love, making the food, the meals. But in the same breath, it's also not just the wonderful time of the year. It can be a very stressful time of the year. We're trying to navigate the business of putting up the trees and getting the gifts and just navigating being around family that maybe we haven't seen in a while, and all the stress that it can come. And for many of us, Christmas cannot only be a a Christmas, for many of us, it could feel like a Christmas filled with a great deal of stress. And so we want you to be part of this conversation tonight. If you find yourself at the holidays already kind of tensing up, already feeling some level of stress, we encourage you to join the conversation. You can call us at 1 855 237 2346. That's 1 855 237 2346. You can email us a question also during the live broadcast of our show at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. And tonight we thought that we would bring one of our dear friends to talk about this topic, about managing holiday stress, and our very good friend and therapist, Silvia Farag. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She was on our show in September. Let me just kind of remind you a little bit about how extraordinary she is. She's a wife and mother to 3 incredible children whose ages are 15, 13, and 10. She holds a master's in social work from Ford University with a specialization in families and children. And she's also a PsyD, getting her doctorate in psychology candidate. She has been a licensed social worker for over 14 years, is certified as a mental health first aid national through the Mental Health Task Force Assembly of Canonical Orthodox Bishops. She is extraordinarily talented and gifted, and we thought, what better person to come and talk to us about this than our friend Silvia. So Silvia, welcome to Live with the Louhs.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back. Thank you for having me.
So, Sylvia, let's start out with the big question. Why do you think stress levels go up so much during such a joyful time of year?
Honestly, I think it comes down to expectations. Extra expectations lead to extra stress, right? So maybe like our never-ending to-do lists normally. So the expectations around hosting events, like Father said, family dynamics, added financial burden, those awesome high-calorie treats. It all leads to stress, anxiety, and procrastination. So, the best way, maybe let's talk stress management first. It goes up a notch for all of us because we've got already so much to do on our list. We have our home, we have our work, and our endless lists and expectations, which is already our baseline in the normal time of the year. Then you introduce the holidays, and now we have to spend time with extended family that we may not necessarily get along with, or maybe spend a lot more money. And there's just so much pressure. And as we know, what unmet expectations do to relationships. So your lists get longer, the pressures mount, and now that baseline has become unbalanced with not enough time, not enough resources. You've just added to that mountain, and it adds a lot of stress, and it tends to overwhelm people. But I think you could break the pattern of these stressful holidays by changing your perspective, really, and your strategy.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So you mentioned all of this sort of extra, and that's just it. For most families, they're already at capacity on a normal day. And to think about the anticipation of all of this, creates and breeds sort of a chronic stress beneath the surface that just sort of nags at us, and the thought of all the things that we have to do that we haven't yet done, and how are we going to handle Aunt Sally, who always stresses us out. So, what advice, do you give people? Where do they start when they think about, trying to manage some of these additional stressors?
So our stress lives in our body. Anxiety lives in our body, but it's really influenced by the way we think about things and how we are thinking, that perspective. And so we can often manage our stress by the way we think about things and how we prioritize things. But for me, I think that culture teaches us to manage stress the way culture teaches us, rather. It just kind of adds to our stress. Oh, you're not journaling? Oh, you're not hitting the gym every day for an hour? Or you're not meal prepping? That, for me, just exasperates my stress. It just adds more to my list. So what I like to do is really dive into what we can prioritize. So I ask my clients, what exactly is on your plate? Which of those things are optional? And how are you thinking about yourself in relation to your to-do list? Because overwhelm is just an emotion that comes from a ratio problem, right? So a ratio problem in your head where you see that list is huge And in ratio, you see yourself much smaller and is not being able to keep up. So, and I'm sure Roxanne could add to this, but one thing I like to do with my clients that they find helpful is we talk about the now problems versus the future problems. So, so for example, some of my high achieving clients, they already have full plates and they get 20 things done, but all they could see are the 50 things that they didn't get to at the end of the day. And then they start that negative self-talk. I wasn't productive enough, or I failed at this. And they also feel like they have to earn rest. So I get to rest after I accomplish everything. So the brain overestimates what it can do in a short period of time, and you'll never feel like you can earn that rest. So when you do rest, like me, you end up feeling guilty. So you see the cycle that we get caught up in?
So, I mean, too, what I also hear you commenting on is that in the height of stress, one of the first things that we do is we stop taking care of ourselves. We stop some of the most important routines in our daily living that keep us feeling whole, spiritually grounded, emotionally grounded, all the things that sort of help us through our regular day seem to be the first thing that we shave off the list when it comes to added burden. But it's the one thing we probably need most as the foundation to launch from the into the added burden, right?
Absolutely. We're always at the end of our list. Where are we on that list? That's what I love to ask everybody. I mean, it's true. You feel guilty if you take time for yourself.
And I love how you're sharing, though, Silvia, how feeling overwhelmed is a ratio problem. I think that's so wise, because I think for many of us, we don't, for when we're in that situation, when we're feeling overwhelmed, sometimes we think that if we just we end up making, I think, some irrational decisions. I had someone tell me the other day, that I just don't feel as connected to Christ. I mean, I feel connected to Christ, but I'm also stressed in these different situations. So maybe I need to lessen my relationship with the church, so I can be able to meet the needs of this other areas of my life. And I was telling them that, if our bodies are, down to our mind, our body, and our soul. So there's the emotional, there's the physical, and then obviously there's the spiritual parts of who we are. And we can obviously add to that as well. If one of those are out of whack, it's not that we're supposed to take the one area that's going to provide us a level of peace out. So we probably need to figure out how we need to implement that level into the other areas. And I think at times when people are feeling overwhelmed, it's that we have to be very careful that we don't just simply make a knee-jerk reaction to cut something out that may actually be helping us and not hurting us.
Right.
And I think,
absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, how do you prevent overwhelm really is to prioritize, right? So, what that person shared with you is removing or shaving off some time with God so he can focus on other areas of his life, I think will do the opposite, actually, will throw things out of whack, right? So to me, what I hear is maybe we need to be spending a lot more time with God, a lot more quiet time, and remembering what happened, what matters most. And this is what we all forget during this time, right? So 1 minute we're giving thanks, and then the stores are open at midnight for 80% Black Friday. It's crazy, the messages and the things we get caught up in. I feel like I'm an expert in all of this because this is how my brain works. I can do 20 things on my list, but it's the other 10 things that, I'm fixated on. When am I going to do it? How am I going to get it done? And then I have a hard time relaxing. But if you're not prioritizing, if all you see are problems that you need to solve, then you really will feel overwhelmed. So what are the things you need to figure out now versus what are the things that need to wait? Keep it short and keep it doable. That's how you set yourself up for success. That's how you train yourself not to get overwhelmed. Identifying what is really a priority and what you can tackle. There's two kinds of problems. If we could think of it this way. It's simple. It's maybe a little too simplistic, but in the interest of this conversation, so overcoming obstacles can be as simple as thinking of it in two ways: a strategy problem and a confidence problem.
Mm-hmm.
The confidence problem is worrying about what others think, and we're trapped in this cycle. I want to get the perfect gift. Will she like my turkey? Will, mother-in-law approve? A lot of the stress around the holidays comes with managing these expectations.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I wanted to invite our listeners, if you'd like to speak with Silvia about our topic tonight, which is all about managing holiday stress, we invite you to do so. You can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can also email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. Sylvia, I just want to get to an email question that just came in, and I wanted you to kind of respond to it. It kind of breaks my heart to read this question, but let me nevertheless read it. It says, "How do I deal with the stress of a verbally abusive sibling? My family is small, and we have holiday dinners at my elderly parents' home. I don't bring up any volatile topics, but I never know what is going to set my sibling off on a tirade, which is always directed at me. I don't want the holidays to be ruined, but I'm thinking about spending Thanksgiving by myself. My sibling refuses to seek mental health counseling for her issues. I've been to a counselor myself, but feel like I have run out of tools on my tool belt for dealing with this level of hostility." How can we
Oh
give
my
her some
goodness.
guidance? Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't want her to him to miss out on spending Thanksgiving with their elderly parents, right? So is there a way maybe we can overlap this? Because nobody should be subjected to this kind of abuse. And it already sounds like they're anxious about the upcoming holiday. If this person is mentally ill, having boundary conversations and all that just seems like it won't work. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Roxanne, but that just it's just such a sad situation. But what about I will have a Thanksgiving brunch with you, Mom and Dad, and, my sibling can have dinner with you or something like that, not to deprive yourself of time spent with your parents, but, and if it's appropriate, maybe speak to that sibling before and really try to make an agreement on what you need the holiday to look like for your parents' sake, so everybody can enjoy themselves. I mean, I don't know if you've ever spoken to your sibling about this, but I think it would really be worth the conversation. And I would actually give that a try if you haven't already. I'm sorry that you're worrying about that. Should not be that way.
That's really tough. And I think that's probably a ongoing, there's so many families who struggle with this sort of thing. And that's the hardest part of the holidays, I think, for most people, sort of anticipating these more deeper struggles and things that we get to avoid all year round, that we're sort of faced with the inevitable. But, and I love what you're saying. I think that, for everyone, this is sort of very different. But I really loved, what you said, Silvia, in terms of we have to remember our end goal. Who are we doing this for? We do what works to bring health and healing to a situation, not really because of the difficult person, but because of two things: our relationship with Christ. And so it's that sort of vertical relationship that decides our horizontal, and because of our relationship with the person that does matter, and so in this situation, our motivation stems from our elderly parents.
Right.
There is that person, who matters to us, and they become the reason we seek that harmony. And I don't know that, in situations like this, those conversations preemptively, sometimes don't get us very far. But if we have that foundation in our hearts, we don't even need that conversation. We just know that I'm going to remember my end goal when I'm going here. I'm going to decide who I want to be when I walk into this situation, that my reactions are all going to be based on those values, not this person's behavior. So, and I think in these moments, that unwavering commitment to live for Christ, it becomes independent of how people behave, because people disappoint us all the time. People hurt us all the time. People can be abusive. People can be, every which way. And I think, not letting our response sort of be inspired by that difficulty or that fleeting feeling, but inspired by who we decide we're going to be. And Proverbs 26:4-5 is something I always share with people around the holidays, which is, do not answer an undiscerning person in relation to their lack of discernment, lest you become like them. And so, we really, God cautions us all throughout the Bible in terms of having a boundary. Don't stay around someone who's too much a certain way in a direction of sin, because that we become tempted, right? And our sin is not excused because of someone else's behavior. No, God doesn't say, okay, well, it's okay because that guy did that, And so I think in moments of offense, it's an opportunity for us. It's a sanctifying process within us. And we decide through our relationship with Christ, okay, how do I bring peace and harmony to this situation? And it could be simply listening with goodwill in the relationship. I'm not going to really argue. I'm going to see who this person is underneath who they're acting as. I'm going to see their story, look at where this possibly stemmed from and what they are suffering with. And I'm going to actively pray in my mind for them as they're spewing, right? Because it keeps me centered. And, just practical feedback. I always tell people, hey, get active at these events, go help with the dishes, help offer to clear the table or plate the desserts. If you feel like sitting at the table is becoming difficult, you can serve in another realm that removes you from the anticipated battles when they are surfacing. And most people aren't very different than who they are. And we have to expect it. And when we see it happening, we can sort of offset it and go and help in other domains. But it's tough. And I know a lot of people, face this sort of struggle.
Yes, absolutely. So, what you're saying is serving in every way, serving God, serving your parents, even just serving your sibling. And in that way is how we find peace. I love that.
We want to welcome all of you to our show tonight, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. We invite you to call us if you're interested in speaking with Silvia on this topic of how do we manage holiday stress. And so much of this is not just unique to the holidays, to be quite honest with you. I think a lot of this we can apply throughout the entire year. But we'd love to hear from you. And you can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can also email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. And so, Silvia, I just kind of wanted to continue this conversation. For those, and I find myself so guilty of this as I'm sharing this question is, those big to-do lists become so overwhelming that we often procrastinate. And I am definitely one of those. I think, Roxanne, you have the basketball hoop that I'm supposed to be fixing in the garage for well over a month right now. And, for whatever reason, I keep saying, well, I got a sermon to write or I got a retreat to present. So, but in all honesty, we do tend to procrastinate, especially on those big things that we have, those big to-do lists. What is some advice that you would give to all of us on how to handle that?
So my friend calls it procrastination assassination. Nothing drives anyone nuts more than procrastination assassination. But, I think it's really important to understand what it really is, because a lot of times we think it's just being lazy or not prioritizing or, something's wrong. It's really, what's really happening is that you're having a stress response, Father.
I told you, Roxanne. Why isn't the therapy you've been providing me all these years working?
I guess not. It's not working. It's failed for 7 months with the basketball hoop.
We all have that type of basketball hoop in our homes, believe me.
Right.
So it's really just a form of flight or avoidance or freeze. You just can't seem to take action, right? So it creates stress in your body, which has you go to your coping skills, which is to avoid or freeze or shut down. And then, much like that caller who sent in that question would prefer to avoid the holiday with their parents instead of dealing with, what they're stressed about. So then you look at that and you have thoughts like, all right, I've got way too much to do. I don't have enough time. I have a sermon to write. There's no way I'm going to get all this done. And this creates stress in your body, especially if you're a high achiever, right? Such as yourself. So you think you have to do it all, and that worthiness is on the line, and that's a really high stakes game. So you end up maybe just endlessly scrolling through social media or Netflix and chill for hours. And it's this vicious cycle where we're procrastinating, and it's obviously counterproductive. We see it, and we all do it from time to time, but it's important to understand what it really is. It really is a stress response.
Mm.
So, when we think about the stress response that we have, when the lists start going and we have the cards to write, the gifts to order, the planning, what do you recommend for sort of how we could think about it in ways that mobilize us into action? Because I do feel like we do put things off until the very end, and then we're sort of stuck in that stress response only grows actually, right? When we put something off, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then, before we know it, we have that sort of sense of urgency now accompanying the big stress response. And now it's just this, heart rates are up, blood pressure's up, and it's the worst time. The lines have gotten long. And, how do you recommend people think about, what they need to do in a way that helps them get started sooner rather than later?
So, the way to get out of this cycle, I think first you just really have to have the awareness that this is what's happening to you. You're procrastinating. Your list is getting longer. The time is getting shorter. So challenge yourself to create short, doable, realistic goals, the minimum baseline. Then follow through on those and get it done, right? Check it off your list. You'll get a dopamine hit every time you check off that to-do list. And then that will encourage you to do the next thing, and then the next thing. But you can't just look at your entire list and say, okay, I can't do this. Small.
Well, I think what you said too, small and doable and realistic, right? Because once we can start checking something off, we do feel better. And I do think we have to let go of, a lot of people sort of put a lot of expectation on how perfect something should be. We've all received the Christmas card. We get probably 150 in the mail. And I can look at every card and know how much time went into each one of those cards. And then, occasionally you receive the one that somebody just on the fly, they're out at the, shopping, and they just, snap the family shot. And I have such an appreciation for that picture, because it's this sort of raw, transparent look into a family that didn't, have to overdo it. And that was okay. And I think in the world of social media and the world of expectation, more is better, better is best, we all have this sort of mentality of even the Christmas card. It should be a simple check off the list, but it becomes a big to-do with, professional photographers and, capturing the right scene and ordering the best card. And it can occupy an immense amount of time.
Absolutely.
So realistic. I mean, I really love hearing that. Simple and realistic to get started.
So Silvia, just, kind of getting, kind of trying to get some real practicality. And I think, us so well that we're all about practical Christianity. I mean, how do we prioritize? Because that seems to be so important for us to kind of, just not only during the holiday season, but just in general. But what are some key steps that we can all take today to kind of help us to prioritize and to be less stressful?
So I think it comes down to the basics. And it's what Roxanne touched upon earlier, showing humility, because there's a little bit of pride in our stress, if you will. It's our own propensity to stress ourselves out for having that perfect Christmas or that perfect card. Like, I will yell at my kids to everybody look and smile and resort to all kinds of bribery. And you should see how many takes it takes for that perfect card.
We've all been there, especially when the kids were babies.
Absolutely. I mean, we lose sight of what's really important. We're all guilty of it. So think about how we can display humility to those around us, and in that way point our family, our friends to the cross, like Christ demonstrated by taking the form of a servant and laying down his life for the sake of us. Be kind to those who aggravate you, right? And we all get aggravated. We're wound up a little tighter around the holidays. I mean, it's easy to snap at those who might get in the way of what you want or disrupt that like perfect hallmark vision of Christmas that we have. whatever it is, it pushes us back against our natural tendency, and we might be repaying smart remarks with smart remarks, or selfishly wrapped up in our own desires. But demonstrating kindness to those in our path, like that Thanksgiving dinner, if we keep in mind, it's not me, it's her. She's ill, she's sick. I will pray for her. I'm here for mom and dad. So kindness, serving those around us, and honestly honoring others' preferences over our own, right? So it could be as simple as, like, does your husband have to hang the extra lights, or being okay with the way your aunt wants to do the family gift exchange? Like, we've got to bend a little bit when we're willing to lay down those rights to honor others. We're emulating Christ. So
I love that. I love that. I think, speaking of that, we actually had a question coming in around that. The writer writes, every time her mother-in-law comes to holiday get together, whether it's Thanksgiving or Christmas, she brings her own china. She decides how the table should be set, and she likes sort of more formalities. And the writer is saying, that's just not me. And I don't know whether to be offended or to just say, go ahead, but she said it always stresses me out. What would you say?
You know what?
Silvia?
It is, this is wiser Silvia, married 20 years now. Maybe Silvia newly married would have been slightly offended, but honestly, it is not worth being offended. It obviously has nothing to do with you. She has a vision. She wants to set the table formally for her son. Let her. If you will extend that grace to her, God will bless it in so many other ways. Is it worth it? Let her bring her china. Let her sit at the table. She's helping you out. Hey, if she wants to cook, let her cook.
Right. Yeah. Just do what works. I think, again, I think it kind of goes back to our own expectations that we set for ourselves. At the beginning of every holiday, I always ask myself, how do I want this to go at the end of the evening when I'm going to bed at night? How do I want to feel? And what was important to me that I wanted to have happen? And that becomes the number one thing that I sort of try to protect and care for all day long. And for me, that's usually harmony amongst people and peace, right? And being present. Like, to me, that's usually my goals every holiday. And I think if we can sort of be intentional about that, then it sort of doesn't matter what's happening around me. That becomes my sort of focus, and to do what works to bring that harmony, right? And because otherwise reactivity creeps in, right? We have all sorts of emotions that create space between us and other people. But if we really take a step back and remember what's important, we can sort of analyze why things are there and figure out how best to go about it to avoid all of the, what I call, pitfalls. And there's a lot of potential explosive devices on holidays, and I do think we have to stop expecting people to be any different than who they are.
Right.
I think so often we go to holidays and we're hoping this year that so-and-so is going to be different. And they aren't. People are usually just who they are. And when we start to expect it, we start to know how to adapt to it, to roll with it. And then suddenly, we're not so frustrated when it happens. We've already anticipated it and decided our response, and we become equipped to sharpen the person more, like, to make them better, to make ourselves better, to bring better to the environment. And I think it sort of helps our own soul, right? Because we don't feel so agitated. It doesn't have time to kind of come in, and we get to model what we prefer. We can model redirection. We can have compassion for people, who they are underneath their struggle. Like, it really just helps, and it helps shape who we become in all those potential, what I call, rabbit holes, right? We can just go down the dark path and then we're stuck. But to really anticipate and expect and decide before we walk into it, how do I want this situation to go? And so if it was that mother-in-law, I want peace and harmony. So, absolutely make it beautiful.
Right.
Who's washing the dishes though? Let's
Yes, maybe we share.
Yeah, we'll share that.
We want to thank you all for joining us tonight and invite you to join the conversation. If you'd like to speak with Silvia, we're talking tonight about managing holiday stress. We'd love to hear from you. You can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. And feel free to email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. And we are broadcasting on our social media platform on Facebook. And so we encourage you, if you're there, definitely fill out a comment there. And I do want to let all of you guys know that next Tuesday, we actually have a very special show. We have Dr. Michael Greger, New York Times best-selling author, for the first time here on Ancient Faith, never spoken on Ancient Faith at all, is going to be speaking to us a great deal about how to eat healthy, and more importantly, how do we fast right, especially as we're entering this Advent season. You do not want to miss him. It's going to be next Tuesday. And again, Dr. Michael Greger, a New York Times best-selling author. Sylvia, kind of coming back to this, and I think, too, to your point, Roxanne, I think we have to always remember, too, that holidays, are not just stressful because of the things that we've already mentioned, that all of us have kind of highlighted, but they're also a lot of times a very, very difficult time because people are oftentimes lonely. For a period of time that is so around people can oftentimes be experiencing a great deal of loneliness. People that may be single or may have lost a loved one during that year. Maybe they're dealing with some concerns about the economy or or their own jobs or their work, stresses that they're also experiencing in their life. And I think it's so important that as we're sharing all this, advice, and we're joking, we're having, but also serious about this in the sense that everyone is fighting a battle that we may not be aware of. And we have to be aware, whether it's the mother-in-law or whether it's, a cousin that always kind of annoys us because they come, late, or whatever the story is about them. It's just always remember that everyone has a story that they're battling, and we just may not know it. And a lot of times, like we do at church on Sunday morning, everyone puts a smile on their face and they come there all happy and excited, as we should. But we also recognize that there's people there that may be smiling on the outside, but have some deep frowns, deep hurt on the inside. And so I think it's important for us to remember that, when it is, as you're mentioning, Roxanne and Silvia, the importance for us to show humility and compassion. This is a season. It is not that we're in. And so as long as we remember that it's in a season, and that ultimately we're celebrating not our birthday, it's Christ's birthday. This is the only birthday that we get the gift, and not the person who's celebrating the birthday. And so I think one of the ways that we could give God a gift is our ability to show compassion, love, humility on his birthday towards the people that are in our lives.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the everyone has a story. We forget that, don't we? I think when an emotion hits, we tend to just follow and react to it rather than go, hey, pause. Wait a minute, what would compassion look like in
right,
this
and it's
moment?
hard when it's family because you've known them for years, or
we have a lot of stories that accompany that story.
Right. And so sometimes it's just very difficult to kind of see past all that. But, it's a good, I think, a litmus test for your walk of faith is how patient and humble and compassionate you are towards those people, because reminding yourself that they do have a story, because the knee-jerk reaction are it's like that old, if you go to the doctor's office, and I was there several weeks back, when they use that little hammer, Roxanne, on your knee, and it hits your knee, and then you kind of kick your knee back up. Well, that's like the reaction. Someone hits you, you have a reaction to hit right back.
True.
And, and what God is saying is that, look, that just be compassionate, be forgiving,
So just because we feel an emotion doesn't mean we have to engage it. That's where boundaries come in, and we can engage compassion instead. I love that. And, I think this is helpful too in speaking about, we had another writer write in about, what do you do when politics comes up at the Thanksgiving table? I mean, this is a
Silvia, how
opportune time, right?
How do you guide your clients with that as well?
Everyone is entitled to share their opinion, but to engage in an argument, in a power struggle over Thanksgiving dinner, and I get this a lot. So their parents might be a tad bit more conservative, and their kids argue about today's politics, Trump versus whatever, and it turns into a horrible argument. Why? it's the same thing. Why are we allowing our emotions to ruin Thanksgiving dinner and react to such a empty conversation? Really, at the end of the day, everyone's allowed to feel what they want. It does not need to go to the level of an argument. So if we approach it that way and we're mindful of, okay, this is a hot topic, and I am going to be mindful of not reacting to their skewed political view that I totally don't agree with, and I can vent later in the car to my husband. That's okay. I mean, wow, you've just demonstrated grace and humility and self-control. You gave a gift piece. So like what Roxanne touched on before, harmony. This is how I would like to measure my Thanksgiving. Was it peaceful and harmonious, and did everybody enjoy themselves? And most importantly, was I reactionary? Did I do anything I might have regretted? So I think controlling our reactions really goes a long way. And again, that what is worth it? Look at your list, prioritize. Is having a lovely dinner more important than winning some political argument, which is circular?
Right.
Which is circular. Absolutely. And I think really, the truth is, and this is what I hear a lot when I see, clients throughout the holidays, it's the questions that emit judgment, right? The judgment that says, I feel something about what I'm asking you, such as, hey, when are you guys going to get married? Or why don't you have a boyfriend yet? Or I thought you gave up smoking. Can you really afford this new house? Oh, really? Your child's still doing X, Y, or Z, right? It's all of those questions that, people suddenly feel unnerved, on edge, and then they suddenly feel in a corner where they have to defend themselves, right? And this is sort of a big thing I see. I'm not sure, Silvia, if your clients talk about this, but it's those judgmental questions from whomever that they're just expecting, and they have no idea how to respond. And I always tell them the same thing. Look, all of that requires empathy for a position or a perspective that really isn't your own. It's what helps us make room for people who think differently, who may be more traditionally minded or raised with a certain set of expectations, or only used to one way of doing things. It's all they know, right? And people's comments reflect their culture, their worries, their upbringing, their ideologies, their preferences. And it isn't something to really engage or defend. It's something to just sort of accept about them and move on from, right? Like it's a curiosity, like, oh, that tells me a lot about your upbringing, your ideologies, your preferences. It doesn't really tell me anything about what I'm doing wrong or what is wrong for me, right? And so I always tell them to just kind of state their position in a gentle, polite, non-defensive way. And we kind of move on to other topics, right? And to do that, we have to really unstick ourselves from the righteousness that kind of broils up within us about their comment making us feel wrong, right? Or it's unjust, or we're offended. Because that really sours the entire experience for people. And that's what sets a tone for such a negative rest of the dinner. Now, I've had people say, I got up from family dinner and I couldn't enjoy the rest of the evening when Aunt so-and-so asked me, about our plans or whatnot. And so, Silvia, I didn't know if you had thoughts on that, because I know that's something that, so many people, talk about throughout the holidays.
Absolutely. So this is what they know. If we approach these dinners with our older family members, for example, who are more enmeshed in their cultures and traditions, this is what they know, and they're doing the best that they can. We have the awareness that we can't change them. I oftentimes tell people, you know what your response could be that is so disarming and so kind. Just say, pray for me. Pray for us.
Right. Yes, that's beautiful.
I mean,
yes,
who's
that's
going
very
to argue
simple
with that?
Yes, you really can't. Yes, you really can't. And we don't know really what that means, but to just pray for us, and
pray for
it's
us.
very disarming. I love that.
Silvia, as we're kind of wrapping up our show, I wanted to kind of just talk to you about these strategies to change from holiday survival to holiday success. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So we have to remember why we celebrate, right? Christmas is not as we enter the Advent season, Thanksgiving, and it's not about performance. It's really about observance, because it's not, perfection is not attainable. You're never going to have this perfect Thanksgiving or this perfect Christmas. It's about observance. The whole world stops and bows their head and celebrates the gifts of us that God gave us of a Savior coming to save us, and commemorating that gift by giving to others. So to make it really successful, like, let's take a breather. And, I know this is the most difficult time of year to slow your pace, but really, like, can we try to slow down and just do those small attainable goals, rather than thinking about everything that you have to do? Just determine to do it differently or minimally. Slow down long enough to remember why we are doing what we're doing. And then just lean into God. If you are lonely during this time, lean into Him for your emotional support. When you're feeling overwhelmed, that's the time to go to God in prayer and pour out your heart to Him. And maybe, tell others how grateful you are. So those beautiful pictures that we take for our Christmas cards, but maybe take it a step further and reach out to people and tell them how you're grateful you are for them, and how you miss them, or just reach out, because doing things like this and maintaining a healthy heart of thankfulness and love, it energizes us and it energizes others. So it helps bring the stress down. Absolutely. So by telling someone that you're truly thankful for them can change your mood and your entire outlook on life. So it helps both of you.
I love that. And I think, service projects are so important for families to take on this time of year. And, thinking about our long lists and our, the ratio being so imbalanced. Interestingly, that's one thing that when we add it to our list, it replenishes and rebalances the ratio. I'll never forget one holiday season when we went to one of the nursing homes here. And the kids usually write a whole bunch of cards, and we go as part of a church ministry. We go, all the kids are handing out these cards to people in the nursing home, and I'll never forget one woman who just pulled me aside after reading one of the cards my daughter Gabriella handed her. She just started weeping. I mean, she was crying and literally weeping. And she looked at me and she said, "You have no idea what this card means to me." She said, "It is the only card I have received this entire year." And unbelievable. I have chills now as I say it, because I can remember her face. It's in my mind. It's like permanently imprinted, because that little thing that took 5-10 minutes changed her day. And she said, please keep coming back. Don't forget us. And that like one thing replenished and rebalanced. And that thing you just said, where slow down, like make it an observance, not a performance, and just like exist in the moment, that rebalanced and helped me to do that. I stopped rushing that day.
Right, because there's a gravitational pull for us to buy into this kind of, commercialized idea of what Christmas is, and we all know better. We know what the real reason for the season is, as it says. But I think it's one of those things that I think it's a great deal of importance, Roxanne, it's important to be intentional. That we have to be intentional for it to be an observance. We have to be intentional to find ways to make a difference. We have to be intentional about it, because again, that gravitational pull that we're living in this world is going to constantly make this holiday season about me, or about we, as opposed to he.
Yeah. And it's those types of the events that sort of stop you in your tracks.
Right.
And if we weren't intentionally like we wouldn't have done that. So I do think, families to sit down together, and say, okay, what can we do to serve this holiday season? Where, if your kids play music, even to have them go play piano in the nursing homes. You know, who can we bake? Who can we cook for? What elderly neighbor needs groceries? I mean, the need is everywhere, right? I mean, but, you know, churches are a great place to start because I know they have a lot of active ministry projects, but really deciding as a family what and how you want to serve can change, you know, how you observe throughout the holiday, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And it makes us less focused on ourselves and seek ways to bless others. So serve those forgotten, the ones in the nursing homes. Take your kids caroling. I know, you know, we do that every year. Bring cookies to the widower next door. There's so many simple, easy, attainable ways to serve others around us that are forgotten. It's easy to think naturally serve all those that we love around us, but we've got to think outside of ourselves. I love that.
Yeah, and I think too, building on what you're sharing, Sylvia, is that it's, you know, so often we try to wait for our feelings to kind of catch up for us to make a decision, to make a choice, and you know what we have to be realizing is that we, you know, what we're called to do during Christmas is really what we're called to do throughout the year, and you know, oftentimes when we see the commercials of the impoverished children, you know, or the children that are battling diseases in hospitals, and you see them soliciting for funds, and it just tugs at your heart because you see so much hurt and sadness, especially during the holiday season. We see these types of commercials, and the reality is that yes, we should help, we should do all that we can to make a difference, but really we're waiting for our feelings to kind of catch up, to tug at us. And the reality is that, you know, really recognizing that what Christ did for us by him entering, you know, there was there's this 500 years, Bible historians talk about this, that there was this 500 years of silence from the last book of the Old Testament to the very first book of the New Testament, where God didn't speak, where we don't have really any written down text of what he said or did during that time. All we hear is silence. And yet he just shows up in such an extraordinary way in Bethlehem. And I think for us, it's just one of those things to remember that, you know, how God was so intentional about coming to save us, and that we are called to do the same, that you know, in our lives and in the people that he has put across our path. So I would encourage our listeners tonight to really begin, you know, I mean, we can't control people. At the end of the day, we can't control people's personalities, their attitudes. We just kind of love them where they're at, but we also recognize that in that loving, we're also being compassionate as Christ was compassionate to us. We're being forgiving like he was forgiving to us. But we're also channeling that negative energy that oftentimes can be a quicksand, a black hole that will just kind of, I don't know, Roxanne, just mire us in this negativity where we don't want to do anything other than just keep obsessing and ruminating over that hurt or whatever, or that person coming, but actually to utilize that energy that we're wasting towards something productive, to being intentional with doing a outreach project that our family can do, or even us as as an individual, whether it be, you know, giving an extra tip to a server at a restaurant, or going out and paying for someone's Starbucks coffee, you know, that's behind us, but just simply being intentional about being purposeful, because that negative attitude that we can experience is like a black hole, friends, and it will suck all of the energy. It becomes a spiritual battle, if you will. It'll suck the energy that God needs us to use to make a difference. The enemy will use that to kind of keep us from sharing Christ's light, and we have to be very cautious about that.
2 Timothy 3:16 says, all scripture is God-breathed. So reading God's word, just sitting and reading his word, it's like a breath of fresh air, literally. From exactly. God, you get a second wind to get through all of this. And, he designed, his design is amazing. Is there time to go through this really quickly? I don't need it.
Sure.
So we have, and we've got 4 wonderful feel-good hormones, right? Endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin. And those balance our system. God put those in our bodies, in our system, to balance out the stress, to balance out the anxiety, to keep us healthy, to keep us well. And we get hits of the good ones, of serotonin and oxytocin, when we love and serve others. And then that is how we balance. I mean, this is all his design. It's amazing. And I always get excited about this, because this is how you balance it, by serving and giving to others and loving those around you, and especially the ones that can't give anything back. So,
So
observance, not performance. And I have to even remind myself of this sometimes. So,
well, I think what you're sharing with us is so beautiful. And I think at the end of the day, it's to remember that we are hardwired to give, and that we're hardwired to show compassion, hardwired. And so we're actually getting back to our true self when we're actually doing those things. And so I hope and pray that our listeners tonight have found this show beneficial as we're ushering in this holiday season. Silvia, it's always, always, always a pleasure to have you on our show. Roxanne and I love you so much, and just an honor to have you as a friend, but also having you on our show as well.
thank you so much. I love you both very much, and God bless you in all that you're doing. It's amazing. You're reaching so many people. I love it.
Thank you,
Thank
Silvia.
you.
We
Thank
enjoy
you.
you always.
Through your prayers and through God's grace, we hope to continue to do that. And to our beloved producer of our show, Matushka Trudy, who just does an amazing job, everyone. She produces our show every single Tuesday night and does an extraordinary job with that. And so to Matushka Trudy, we thank you so much for all that you do for us. And we thank all of you for joining us tonight. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, for the very first time on Ancient Faith, Dr. Michael Greger, he's a New York Times best-selling author. He wrote a book called How Not to Die. It's a really a book about just eating healthy and living right. And definitely something that I think that, we would love all of you to be with. It's going to be next Tuesday. Definitely tell your friends about it. He's a New York Times best-selling author and
all about plant-based eating. And so, just in time for the Nativity fast, really how to ground ourselves spiritually through eating in ways that our body was meant to thrive.
And these are things that have been so much part of the Orthodox theology all these years.
Absolutely.
We're seeing books written now about it, but the reality is that the church knew that and they recognized that. And so we felt it'd be great to just kind of have him on our show. And so he agreed to be on our show. So that, again, will be next Tuesday. We definitely encourage you all to be there and to tell your friends about it. And finally, as we mentioned at the top of the show, if you find that you're looking for some daily words of encouragement, especially as we enter these holiday seasons, definitely do us a favor and join our daily inspirational messages. You can go to our website at thelohs.com, click on the subscribe button, and every single morning you'll receive a daily word of encouragement. Friends, God bless you, and stay strong in your walk of faith.
Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne are the authors of the book Renewing You, a priest, a psychologist, and a plan, which can be purchased at store.ancientfaith.com. Their daily inspirational messages can be found at thelohs.com.